I'm going to ask Kim to come on over here and stand next to me. This is Kim Laurie. She and I did a lot of the heavy lifting, and we got a lot of help from a lot of people in this room. I want to make some special recognition because this event could not and would not have happened without the donors. So if you donated money to make this event happen, would you please stand up? I don't want to embarrass you, but I want to thank you. There's a bunch of donors that don't want to be recognized because they are just shy. But I will tell you, we had, how many petition signatures so far? 1,200, something like that? 1,800 petition signatures, excuse me, 1,180 petition signatures in opposition to what NEOSCC is doing. And we have more signatures coming in. And so that says something about the way some citizens in our, what NOACA likes to put it as the greater Cleveland area. I like to think of it as Geauga County. Kind of a separate thing. So anyway, our 60 donors, our 1,200 petitioners, and the organizations listed on this board up above, the Geauga County Tea Party, the Mennonite 12 Group, the McFain Group, the Ohio Liberty Council, the Portage County Tea Party, the Cleveland Tea Party, and many, many other citizens made this happen. So, well, Kim and I kind of tried to organize this and maybe not organize the best that it could be. Let me tell you, we ran our little tushies off trying to get this all together. There was a lot of people involved with making this happen. And so I want to thank each and every one of you. So, we are here today for a particular reason. Do you want to talk about that?
Can you hear me okay? Yep. Okay. So Skip and I and many others throughout the year have been attending NEOSCC's workshops, town hall meetings, whatnot. Most of the time when we try to speak up in opposition, we are silenced in one way or the other. And so finally at a town hall event a few months ago, we finally said, look, if we hold our own event, will you attend? And they said they would. And Hunter Morrison is here today, thank you, from NEOSCC. But that's why we're here today, because we needed to make sure that we had a place where we could actually speak and make sure our voices were heard. So the rules today, very simple, let's just be respectful. We have reserved about an hour after the presentation for Q&A, so that should be plenty of time for comments and questions. So while Hunter and we are presenting, if you could just save your questions for afterwards, there will be plenty of time to address them. So again, just want to thank the speakers for joining us. Special thank you again to the donors. We definitely couldn't have done this without you, as well as our volunteers who have been helping us today.
I don't like being tied to the podium. Is this working? Hello? Okay. I prefer to wander. Just up and up. Could you pump that up just a little bit, Chris? Okay, so here's what we're about to do today, just so you know. There's an old presentation style that says, say what you're going to say it, and then tell people what you said. And so that's what we're going to do. What we're about to do today is we're going to allow NEOSCC, who graciously agreed to come. By the way, thank you, Hunter. I won dinner. There was a bet that I had with Representative Lynch that you would not show up. I won. And so I thank you for that, and I appreciate it. I've got a very good restaurant picked out to go to. And so Mr. Morrison is going to get up and present the NEOSCC case. And he's going to do a great job. I've heard it before. We're going to present our case. And by the way, we're going to ask that you refrain from asking questions or cat calls or anything you are in the mood to do until we're done with the presentations. So write those down because there's going to be lots of opportunity for questions and comments. And so NEOSCC is going to provide their case, we're going to provide our quick case, then we're going to have questions and answers, and then we're going to talk about next steps because there are going to be next steps. And so, before we get into the presentation, if you're an elected official and you're here, I'd like for you to stand up. Okay, thank you. If you're an elected official and you chose to show up today, I thank you. I will tell you, we reached out to a large number of elected officials. You just saw demonstrated to you part of what I consider a challenge. We had to have this room filled with elected officials because what we are about to contemplate with this regional effort will impact every elected official in our greater Cleveland area, or otherwise known as Jug County, Cuyahoga County, Medina, on and on and on. And so, special thanks to those elected officials who made a choice to be here today and to get some information. And again, we're gonna say this over and over again, special thanks to our donors. This is a great venue. And it's a real good opportunity for us to present our case. God bless you. Okay, so what you're going to discover today. You're going to discover something about the NEOSCC's plan, and I believe it's not a consensus. It's rather an urban-centered direction and a federally directed program. That's what we think you're going to see. Now, we're going to have two sides presented, and we'll see where that goes. You're also going to see that we believe that there's faulty data, some skewed data, and there's some steering going on. We'll see. We're going to see both sides of the case. And you're going to see a plan whose goal is to neutralize and convert opposition, which is many of you. And so that's what we think you're going to discover. And we'll see where that goes. We will, as a disclaimer, we're not going to be responsible for keeping you awake at night. Some of what you see may make you feel uncomfortable. And if you're anything like me, when I go home at night, this stuff sits with me and I can't sleep. We're not going to be responsible for keeping you awake. And by the way, as we were trying to go through and pick out information to show you, there was far too much information for us to really present. I could keep you here for 5 hours or 6 hours. As it is, we're not going to keep you more than 3 or 4. And so, but there's far more information. We've got a slide deck that we will not hit every slide in probably, and we will probably be referencing some of the information that Mr. Morrison is going to present. And so, there's far more information. We're asking a little patience on that. We've got some speakers who have some opinion on this that are going to be presenting. And so, I just want you to know, there is a lot of information out there, and we're going to give you some sources where you can go to do your own homework. Okay, I want to introduce the individuals that are here. By the way, I didn't mention this earlier, or didn't ask for this earlier. If you happen to be with the NEOSCC, would you please stand up? Okay, so these are some of the NEOSCC guys. And we want to thank them for being here. While we see things ideologically differently, and we may have a different viewpoint, I think we all want to accomplish something good. We just see what that is, what that means differently. So we thank him for coming and for being here. So with that said, as an introduction, I'm going to let Kim do that.
Okay, so first on the list, but these are in no particular order of importance, is me. I'm Kim Laurie. I'm president of the Mentor 912 Project. I live in Willoughby. That's Lake County, not Greater Cleveland. Also, Skip Claypool. He happens to be an alternate on the NOACA board, so it's interesting to see kind of an insider's perspective. He's also the Geauga County Tea Party president and a former Geauga County commissioner. We have Hunter Morrison from NEOSCC. He's the executive director, and he will be doing a presentation here shortly for us. Judge Tim Grindell, Geauga County Probate and Juvenile Court Judge. Matt Lynch, State Representative for the 76th District. Alex Kellerman, Hudson City Councilman. And we have Brenda Mack, President of the Ohio Black Republican Association.
And most of you here, I think, know that Judge Grindell's background is a little bit more robust than Judge. He's had a little experience down at the State House, and so he's got some perspective that that many of us here don't have, and he's just a phenomenal speaker to boot. As are all of our speakers, by the way. I don't want to laud any particular glory on Tim. So, with that said, NEOSCC presentation. We're going to switch gears and I'm going to bring up the presentation. I'm going to ask Mr. Morrison to come up and do his presentation. This is it. Yeah, we put that where in this section forward.
Well, Skip, first of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and to talk about what we're trying to do, but also to engage you in a discussion about what the future of Northeast Ohio is. We're committed, and I'm personally committed to direct democracy. That requires people to be informed, voice their opinions, and engage in a process of charting the future for themselves and their communities. That's what Northeast Ohio is all about. We're really part of the Western Reserve. We go back to the continuous town hall meetings of our forefathers. And this is, in my view, one of our opportunities to talk with folks about what we're doing and what we're hoping to see for the future, but more importantly, what you see, and how your opinion gets reflected in what we ultimately recommend back to the communities that have asked us to look into the future. Let me tell you what Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities is all about, what Vibrant Neo 2040 is. It's a regional visioning and decision-making framework for Northeast Ohio. It's not a plan. It's a framework that looks together what our common interests are and what our common considerations and concerns are, and what are some of the trends that are affecting all of us in all of our communities. And the broad goal is to create a more vibrant, resilient, and sustainable Northeast Ohio. And I know sustainable is a loaded word, but I want to focus on resilient. Because we're resilient people in Northeast Ohio, we faced challenges before, we're facing challenges today. And by talking together and working together we can do it. The consortium is a nonprofit organization that came together, was created to go after a unique federal fund, a grant program from the combined United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of Transportation, and Environmental Protection Agency, to encourage those agencies to work together and work with local communities. It's a 3-year planning program that deals with 12 counties, including the ones that are listed there. And by the way, Skip, I'm glad to be in Greater Geauga County here, because it's important that we reflect all the points of view and the divergent points of view of the citizens of each of our communities. We also receive matching funds from the Fund for Economic Future, which is a consortium of the philanthropic organizations over the same geography. The consortium is a nonprofit organization. Again, it has representatives from from 5 of the 12 counties directly, and 4 of the major cities. But most importantly, it has the representation of the 5 metropolitan planning organizations and councils of governments. Now, why is that important? These are the organizations that have between them about 175 elected officials who meet together to look into the future and decide how we spend in our communities major road works, highway works, infrastructure works. In addition, there are several of the metropolitan housing authorities, the colleges and universities, metro parks, transit authorities, and a number of non-governmental organizations that came with us to look into the future and to bring with them some of their concerns and resources in that capacity. It's a framework that we're developing, but also a way of looking at a set of tools that communities can use to look into their own specific future. One is a dashboard that looks at the questions of what we can do to measure progress in our communities. Policy recommendations that deal with things that are of common concern across Northeast Ohio. Toolkit and best practices, which is perhaps the most valuable thing that's going to come out of this for local governments, because it allows and enables local governments to do more with less, because frankly, that's what we're all faced with. And finally, pilot programs to test some ideas in the local context. We're using a process called scenario planning, which is a way of looking into the future in a very disciplined manner. It looks at what is likely to impact land use and transportation choices in the future, get the major issues on the table, and examine a range of strategies in the face of an uncertain future. And hopefully to work with communities to align local actions on a regional vision. We've had a number of workshops and open houses, and I would certainly encourage you to, if you haven't already, to come to them and to participate in them. The first one was in May, dealing with something called business as usual, the trends, looking at the last 20 years and looking into the next 25 and seeing where it's likely that we're going to be headed. Alternative scenarios, we met in July and August and looked at some of the different options for the future, and we're having a set of public meetings coming forward in next month to talk about that again. The whole idea is to talk about these, to talk about where we've been, what looks like our future if we continue on this path, what are some of the options, and where should we go? I'll go briefly through what we reviewed at the last set of workshops. And again, all of this is online, and I know Skip and others have looked at this material. I would encourage you to do the same. But the first was to look at the trends, to look at patterns of development in Northeast Ohio. And what we find is basically over the last 20 years, we've seen almost no population growth and no job growth. But we've seen a continued expansion of our footprint, which means as a whole, we're developing more land and expending more money on infrastructure across the region. It varies from community to community. But we're also seeing a parallel pattern of abandonment in our core cities. And it's worse in places like Youngstown and parts of Cleveland, but it's also affecting all of our older cities as people seek the American dream further out, leaving behind the old neighborhood. That has an effect on all of our budgets. It varies from community to community, but it is a broad pattern, which if it continues, will get worse. The bottom line in all of this is essentially with no new population and employment to speak of in the aggregate, we are creating essentially a surplus of housing, industrial, and commercial space, which explains why things like Randall Mall are empty, why they haven't been picked up, and also neighborhoods in Cleveland, and in Youngstown, and portions of Akron and Canton are showing this continued sign. The broad trend that's affecting the core of our communities is abandonment, and that's one of the issues that is facing our region. Again, what we're trying to do is look at the broad patterns and say, well, what happens if we continue on this path? What happens is we wind up developing about 92,000 additional acres of land, mostly in suburban housing, and we abandon about 77,000 acres of essentially older neighborhoods. One of the plus spots in all of this has been an effort by a number of groups, led by the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, to protect sensitive habitats and conserve land to preserve the things we all value. And as that continues, if that pattern continues, we will have about 121,000 additional acres under conservancy across Northeast Ohio, protecting landscapes and watersheds and habitats that are important to all of us. What does this mean for Northeast Ohio? It means basically that we're abandoning about 18 housing units a day, about 175,000 housing units across the region over the next 25 years. And those of you who may have been listening and watching what Attorney General DeWine has been working on, and our two senators on trying to bring money into Northeast Ohio to deal with the crisis of abandonment, I think need to understand that the pattern we're developing is going to yield about 175,000 additional housing units that are abandoned. What are the impacts? Scenario planning looks at the patterns of development in 1.8 million parcels in Northeast Ohio. That's how many pieces of property there are there. And also looks at the impacts on our budgets in each one of our taxing jurisdictions. There are about 400 townships, municipalities, and cities and counties. There are about another 300 taxing jurisdictions. The model that we are using looks at those and says, okay, what happens to our overall future if we continue on this path? And basically what we're going to see is continued fiscal stress. This drawing here looks basically at the revenue and expenditures of all of those jurisdictions and projects that out and says, if this continues, what are the likely impacts? And what we're seeing is the likely impacts are across the region and by county, the continued stress. Now, some counties are doing better than others. Some are more prosperous than others today. But on average, we're in balance because, frankly, the state requires that each one of our jurisdictions balance their budgets. But as we look into the future, we see even the best performing counties today are doing worse in the future than the worst performing counties today. That really is the thing that caused us to take another look at what are some of the options to avoid the sort of situation that some of us went through in Cleveland in the 80s and default to deal with the challenges that local governments are facing today. Now, the projections that we're done are basically very conservative. They basically say what we've done over the last 20 years, we project out for the next 25 years, and we see very modest growth of jobs and population. Not all of us believe that that's the way the world is going to work, and hope and work very hard to build up the economic base of Northeast Ohio. And so we've been working with Team NEO and Cleveland State and the group that's been looking at with Jobs Ohio at the future economics base of Northeast Ohio, and they've come back and said in broad terms, we should be able to perform at the rate of the rest of the nation. We should be able, as Northeast Ohio, not to continue to be underperforming and continue to be a loser region. Looked at nationally, we should be able to perform at the national level, in fact, a little above it. So we said, okay, what does that mean? What that means is we may get another 500,000 jobs in Northeast Ohio over the next 25 years and do things right. We're smart about it. We also said, okay, now let's understand here. Northeast Ohio has been losing population and losing congressmen for a long time. The whole Great Lakes has been doing that. But what happens if we're smart about it? We talk about it. We have water, we have shale gas, we have polymers, we have innovation, we have low congestion and a quality of life in here that's unbeatable. Why aren't people coming back? Well, let's assume they do. Let's assume as the country grows by another 40 million, grows by a significant population over the next 25 years. We get another 40 million people in Northeast Ohio. Well, how many people are we going to get in the country? We're suggesting that we might get another 800,000 people in Northeast Ohio. What does that mean? That means that we're getting towards the projected population we thought we were going to be in 2000 when we did these numbers 30 years earlier. We get the people that are no longer here back. But what we then look at is what the impacts are. What we're seeing is that growing using the same patterns benefits us all, but not to the same degree as we need to. What we're seeing also is that there may be some other ways to do things differently. Various communities have been focusing on investment in the core cities. There's efforts to try to protect the environmentally sensitive lands. But one of the key things is to use the infrastructure we've already invested in. Every time we abandon a neighborhood, we abandon all that infrastructure that's there, all the roads and the sewers and the water lines, the power lines and the gas lines. Left empty, it affects our taxes and our rates. Can we, in fact, make a better use of those areas where we've already paid for the infrastructure? Can we look at at whether we're developing the sort of communities that the younger population, and frankly some of us who are baby boomers, are looking at as walkable mixed-use developments? Can we expand our public transportation networks and provide better funding for our public transit in Northeast Ohio? And can we prioritize our development in existing communities? Existing communities in each one of our counties that are the historic cores of our counties. Well, what happens if we do that and don't see much growth. What we see is our counties and our communities are going to be doing better, and we would do much better, frankly, if we also grew and did things differently. This is a summary, and again, it's a lot of information to put out there. That's why we put all that information on the web so you can take a look at it at your leisure. But we're comparing 4 different scenarios. Now, these aren't plans, these aren't predictions. We're projecting in a disciplined way the relationship between jobs, employment, land use patterns, and the effect on our bottom line. But these are basic. I tell people this is more like a stress test. It's more like going to the doctor and finding out under different conditions, well, how do we fare? Well, if the trend continues and we grow modestly, we're likely to see the development of another 250,000 new housing units in Northeast Ohio, but the abandonment of about 175,000 housing units. If we grow the same, in other words, we continue the same patterns, but experiencing that uptick in both population and jobs that we're hoping for, we will see a doubling almost doubling of the development, and a significant reduction in the abandonment, because people are there's more demand. There'll be more demand on existing housing. What if we do things differently? What if we don't grow and do things differently? We see an increased focus on using the housing we already have, and a lower abandonment over again on the right side of the drawing. And then if we grow and do things differently, we again see new housing construction and a significant conservation of the existing housing stock. But what happens when we grow out? And again, we're just looking at a range of options, and it is our decisions collectively and individually and in our own communities as to how to respond to this. But again, we looked at a number of different factors that we think are important for you to take into consideration. How many acres of land do we develop if we continue to move outward? How many lane miles of new roads do we build and have to pay for? How many acres of prime agricultural land do we lose? How many acres of high ecological value do we lose? How many acres of new impervious cover do we create? That's hardscape, that's parking lots and roofs, and that creates pressure on our sewer and water systems. What about the daily vehicle traveling across Northeast Ohio? What percentage of our jobs are accessible by transit? How many people live near transit so they have more choices about how to move around? And in my mind, one of the most important things, how does it affect the cost to revenue ratio? And again, I don't want to belabor this, but these are the numbers that have come forward for this. And basically, what we're seeing is if we continue to spread out and don't see much growth, we will lose significant, about 30,000 acres of prime farmland, about 6,000 acres of conserved land. We'll develop about 23,000 acres of additional land. And the effect, again, is about a 33% drop of revenues over expenses. Now that means that the governments of Northeast Ohio, under this condition, are likely to experience continued pressure. That's what this is saying. Whether you meet that with increased taxes or reduced services depends on how your governments respond to that, how our governments respond to these challenges. But this is the scale of the challenge we see in this particular scenario. Again, what happens if we grow and don't do things differently? We consume more land. We build more lanes of road that need to be maintained. We lose about twice as much acreage in prime farmland. We again see an improvement, but across the region, this is looking at all 12 counties, we're still below the line. Again, some will be above, some will be below, but we're still, as a whole, below the line. And again, if we looked at some additional alternatives and did not grow, we can reduce the amount of outward migration on the land that's being put under development, the lane miles that we're faced with, the loss of prime agricultural land and sensitive ecological areas drops. The acres of impervious surface drop as less sewers we have to build to take care of all of that, and less water treatment issues. And we have, perhaps as a whole, as a region, we get above the line by about 10%. We're generally speaking more prosperous. And again, it varies from county to county, it varies from community to community. This is looking together at what's going on in Northeast Ohio. And again, if we grow and do things differently, we see a significant uptick in terms of revenues over expenditures. This is suggestive that there is a benefit of talking together and working together to do things differently than we have over the last 25 years. We're not driving the same cars that we did, certainly not driving the same car I was driving in 1970 when I got out of college. We're not living in the same places. Our worlds are changing, and we have opportunities again to talk to each other and talk in our communities about how we want to move into the future. So again, what we're asking you to do, and I'm glad, Skip, and Kim, that you brought this together. And I do want to thank the donors for supporting this, because it's important that we have an informed discussion and a continuing discussion about the future of Northeast Ohio. Again, we have a set of public meetings coming up in October, and I believe, Jeff, we've got handouts on that. In fact, it's on the screen right here. We'd invite you to come. What we've done with the work we did in the last round of meetings was to analyze where it appears to me and appears to us that people are headed, what they're concerned with. But it's only going to be as robust as the participation is. So we encourage your participation. And we encourage you to go online and to participate with us also on online forums online responses that we have afforded folks. But to this point, as Skip said, he didn't think we'd come out. He doesn't know that we'll go anywhere at any time to have discussions about the future of Northeast Ohio. I appreciate you coming out on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and I will only say, Skip, I forgive you for having it on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. The only blessing in all of that is Ohio State is playing this evening, so we're not missing a perfectly wonderful game. So again, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Hunter. By the way, I might point out that we're not really a democracy or a republic. I don't know. There is a bit of a difference there. We do have something called representatives that we elect and that we hold accountable. And some of us are very concerned that our elected officials, those folks that we want to hold accountable, are not stepping up. And so we may want to reach out to them and ask them to do that. So with that said, bear with me just a second. I have to switch the presentation here. Hunter, would you mind if I save this? I want to reference one of your slides, a couple of your slides. So I'm going to take that as a yes. So hang on here. Kim, would you please do a little dance for us, or song or something? There you go. I dance pretty well, so I tap dance. Oops. Okay, we're waiting for the computer to catch up here. It was really loaded down into that last presentation. Okay, so we're going to get into a citizen's view. Say it again. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Kim just reminded me that I'm out of sequence. So, with that said, do you want to do this? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'm only going to take a couple minutes, but there's something that I think is really important to be addressed before we start. And I don't have as much experience as everybody else standing in front of a large crowd speaking, so I actually wrote it down, so bear with me while I read it. I have two messages. one for the audience and one for the board members of NEOSCC and the MPOs who are present, which I don't know that there are any. I decided to write this rather than ad-lib because it's important and I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything, so I said that twice. First, my message to the audience. It's been quite clear at NEOSCC's workshops that there is an us versus them mentality among the members of the audience. It's very difficult to break the right-left paradigm because people tend to see issues in black or white. If I'm a Democrat, I believe in this. If I'm a Republican, I believe in that. However, there are common values and principles that as Americans we all agree on. It needs to be understood that regionalism is one of the few issues that should actually unify people on both sides of the aisle because regionalism decreases individual rights. Every freedom-loving American should agree on the importance of individual rights. It doesn't require a particular party affiliation to see that. One of the people who has broken the party mold is Rosa Quare, a liberal Democrat from California who led the regionalism resistance movement in her hometown. She was a government appraiser and was routinely asked to testify as an expert witness in land evaluation for the government. In order to value a property, she needed to first know how it was used. So she would visit the planning department. It didn't take her long to discover that the planning department limited people's use of their own property under the guise of environmental protection. I'd like to quickly read an excerpt from her book, which tells just a little more about herself and her experience. Many of you have probably heard of this book. It's called Behind the Green Mask. So these are her words, obviously. I am a Democrat and have been since I first registered to vote in 1974. The relevance of my party affiliation is that I have always been a liberal. I am pro-choice, anti-war, a feminist, and gay. Kay and I were legally married on our 16th anniversary in 2008 in California. For over 30 years, I had hosted speak-outs, marched in demonstrations, and passed out petitions. I thought Bush stole the election twice. I knew about 9/11 the minute I watched the towers came down and never believed the official story. I've always been involved in national issues, but after reading Dude, Where's My Country by Michael Moore, I resolved to take his advice and get involved locally. Shortly after I started researching, I began to wonder if we were the only liberals who were aware of it and were taking it seriously. How could that be? Democrats own property. Liberals don't want to live in a corporatocracy. Free people don't accept totalitarian rule. Civil rights are a vital element of our freedom. Why were people saying that regionalism was a right-wing fantasy? What was this polarization all about? Was it to keep us from looking behind the green mask? We definitely knew we were onto something because of the tremendous amount of effort that was put into trying to discredit and attack us. And this is a really great book, obviously. There's a lot more detail. But basically, it is about how people who are trying to expand regionalism use the environment. They've hijacked the environmental movement to try to get more people involved. But she is a, as you can tell, very liberal Democrat who also, as we do, recognize the dangers of regionalism. Rosa wrote this book to explain the dangers of regionalism and how the planning departments and organizations, such as we have NEOSCC here, have hijacked the environmental movement to further their regionalism agenda. And in many places across the country, it's working. However, she led the resistance movement in her hometown and succeeded. We will lead the resistance here. God help us all if we fail. Left or right, it won't matter then. Now my message to NEOSCC and the MPOs. You've been fabricating consensus by reporting that you have had 589 participants total at your workshops, a drop in the bucket compared to the 4 million residents of the 12 counties you're targeting. Look around you here today. Not only are you surrounded by citizens who feel so strongly that what you're trying to do here is bad that they have chosen to spend their precious Saturday afternoon here with us. But we have here also a petition with almost 1,200 signatures of citizens who do not want regionalism in Northeast Ohio, which we will provide copies for you. 1,200 plus maybe 250, 300 here today. Also a drop in the bucket compared to 4 million, but it's undeniable that our drop is still bigger than yours. Where is your consensus? And if you think this is our last hurrah, our last ditch effort, hear this. We're not going away. In fact, we have just begun. We are as relentless as you. In fact, we are more because we have something to protect, our individual liberty. So now, without further ado, I will introduce Skip Claypool again to go ahead and start the main part of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We're not doing very well much speaking. Kim's pretty good, don't you think? Mennonite group, you are so lucky. You are so lucky. We're going to steal her away, by the way. I'm just pointing that out to you, Joe. Can't keep her. So. Okay, we're going to get into the meat of our presentation, and we've invited quite a cast of experts, subject matter experts. Kim and I, neither one will claim to be experts in a lot of this stuff. We do a lot of homework, we do a lot of reading, we attend a lot of meetings, but we're not experts in some of this stuff. And so we have invited some experts to show up. And as soon as I can get some cooperation, we'll be good to go. And so we're going to start with this. I believe what we have here is a battle of ideologies. Clearly, there are people in this room who feel one way, and there's people, maybe in this room, there's a few folks, I think, that maybe feel the other way. Our view of what we're doing with this regionalism thing smacks of big government. If you look at this chart up here, and you ask where NEOSCC comes from, you ask where the money comes from. Follow the money. Follow the money. Who's paying for this effort? It's HUD. But it's not only HUD. HUD, the EPA, and the Department of Transportation came together to create an organization called Partners for Sustainable Development. We're going to hear that term again, sustainable development. And they have a national effort. This is not Northeastern Ohio. This is going off across the nation. When you take a federal grant, most of our elected officials, by the way, don't read the grants. Unfortunately, I do. If you read the grants, you will find stuff that keeps you awake at night. If you read MAP 21, which governs our NPOs, oh my God. It will scare the dickens out of you. So there's many of us that feel that we've got a little too much federal intrusion into our state. What is a regional plan if it's not from the citizens, if the root of it doesn't come from the citizens and from our elected officials? And so I'm going to plant that seed with you. So there's a battle between big government, collective property rights. A lot of what you heard from Mr. Morrison was, we think it's important. I didn't hear citizens' liberty, citizens' choice, citizens' private property rights in that discussion. I hear a lot of, in NEWACA and in a lot of governmental programs, social justice, environmental justice, sustainable development. That's the one side of the ledger. The other side of the ledger, the one in which I believe most of the people in this room believe in, is people are the answer. Individual choice, local decision-making, local accountable officials. That's what's important. How many people agree with that? And so that's what we're going to talk about here a little bit today, is that battle of ideologies. Let's be clear. This is not about Northeastern Ohio. This is bigger than Northeastern Ohio. Much, much bigger than Northeastern Ohio. This is a battle for our hearts and minds of the people in this country. This is about ideology and where this country is going to go and where Northeastern Ohio is going to go. And so we're going to talk about a lot of that. So with that said, I'm going to ask Judge Grindell to come up and talk about liberty. And he is eminently qualified to talk about it.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, first of all, for taking the time to come out and talk about this very important issue. A little groundwork. Some of you knew I was a state rep. Some of you knew I was a state senator. Today I'm a judge. But most importantly for this conversation, I'm a resident of Chester Township in Great Geauga County, Ohio. I've known Hunter for a long time. I do have two observations. I do find it odd that you include my home county, Geauga County, in your regional plan, but don't show us the courtesy of having one of those meetings you schedule up here in our county. Why are you afraid of the rural suburban areas? Every one of those cities up there, Warren, Paynesville, are urban areas. Why don't you come out to where the people are that you want to change their way of life and their lifestyle? Number two, I don't know how Tim Grindell and Diane Grindell's moving to Geauga County could be blamed for 500,000 people moving out of the city of Cleveland over 60 years. We never lived there. Poor management, poor political leadership, non-competitive unionism, terrible schools, unsafe neighborhoods. That may have something to do with the situation. Why don't you fix those problems instead of telling us how to live? Thomas Jefferson said, the true foundation of Republican government, and Skip Claypool's right, it's a Republican government, not a pure democracy, is the equal right of every citizen in his person and in his property and in their management. It's not just that we have a private property right, we have the right to manage that private property. Ayn Rand, who I'm sure nobody on NEOSCC probably has ever read, has stated that without property rights, no other rights are possible. Now, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, were sharecroppers in Eastern Europe. They came to this country for the American dream and the right to own a piece of dirt, because in Eastern Europe, they were never going to have that right. My grandfather left because the Russians took over his country and conscripted him in the service for 5 years, and when he got out, he found out they were coming to get him again. He knows what it's like to be under an authoritarian government. And if he was alive today, he would have a lot more things to say about taking away his property rights than his great-grandson. The right of private property in Ohio has been recognized as an original and fundamental right since the 1850s. What you see, first of all, what was up there was the Ohio constitutional provision, Article 1, Section 19, that says that we have an inalienable right, a right that cannot be taken from us except for a public necessity. And I assure you, in 1850, they were thinking about roads and canals, and they weren't thinking about social engineering and people telling them how to live or where to live. The Ohio Supreme Court tells us this. As a judge, I will hit my one legal spot here today. All of you should go home and read Norwood versus Horney. 110 Ohio State 3rd, 353. This is not a case from 1850s. This is a unanimous decision of the Ohio Supreme Court in 2006. And what did the Supreme Court say? Justice Maureen O'Connor, our still current Chief Justice in Ohio, she said the right of private property is an original and fundamental right existing anterior to the formation of the government itself. Anterior, before the formation of government itself. Government is the necessary burden imposed on man as the only means of securing the protection of his rights. And this protection, the primary and only legitimate purpose of civil government, is accomplished by protecting man in his right of personal security, personal liberty, and private property. What does that mean? It means that government's supposed to recognize that our right transcends government. I have a right to my piece of dirt. My right to my piece of dirt should not be regulated except where necessary for the extreme public purpose. The fallacy in this whole regionalism concept that is being pushed by NEOSCC is that property use is driven by government and not the right to be driven by the individual who owns the property. Government is not supposed to tell me how to use my property. If I want to live in Timbuktu and I can afford to buy a place in Timbuktu, I have a right to live there. If I want to live in downtown Cleveland and I can afford to live in downtown Cleveland, I have a right to live there. But government is supposed to protect me in the exercise of both of those rights and not drive me in one direction versus the other and disrespect my right to live in a rural area if I wish. If I wish to pay more for pavement because you got to come out to me, I have that right. If I wish to pay for more septic systems or for sewer systems or for whatever else government says I must do for health reasons, I have that right. The fallacy in this whole process is that we do not have that right. That some social engineers know better for us than we do ourselves. And that ultimately we will be subservient to their plan instead of our individual rights to exercise our individual liberties with respect to our each individual piece of dirt. When Diane and I go to use our property today, we're already subject to township zoning control. We are already subject to the county Department of Health for our septic system. We are already subject to the county's solid waste management regulations. We are subject to the Ohio EPA for septic and our water use. And we have a puddle on our property, so we are subject to the Army Corps of Engineers and the US EPA and their wetlands regulations. Which, by the way, 60 years ago, the United States government paid you for filling that wetlands because it eliminated mosquitoes. And today they put you in jail for doing the very same thing. I'm also subject to FEMA because we have a creek on our property. I don't need to be subject to a bunch of unelected bureaucrats and social engineers. I go back to the Ohio Constitution that says I have an inviolate right to use my property. I go back to the Norwood decision that says that right transcends government. And the entire fallacy of this process is that a quasi-governmental group of unelected bureaucrats will have more authority over what I do with my property than my wife and I will ourselves. I believe that's unconstitutional. I believe it's unnecessary. Don't waste the money telling us how to live. Go back to the urban areas and fix their problems. Thank you.
I know what you're thinking. He did better than me. Okay, I get it. By the way, I was at a NEOSCC meeting yesterday. The head of the Department of Transportation for mass transportation was in Cleveland, speaking to the NEOSCC board and a whole bunch of other people. That individual, and Grace Gallucci, who was the executive director of NEOSCC, made this comment. We're going to move into a multimodal world. And what they intended to say, or what they did say, was that involves mass transit and bicycles. Anybody that doesn't believe that that is our future does not have vision. They said that. It's in a recording, which I intend to get. Their interest is to move you to bicycles and to mass transportation. Now, in Geauga County, they should be including horses, but bicycles and mass transit. Just think about that for just a second. And so, in the context of that mindset, just think about Amtrak and the ridiculous fiscal responsibility Amtrak is in, Think about the transit buses who run around empty in Lake Tran, in downtown Cleveland, and in Geauga County. You got one person on an 18-passenger bus. Look at the transit system, the buses that are running around, and see if it doesn't make more logical sense to do a study to see what kind of buses we really need. We don't need a double-length bus to carry 2 people. But that is what government gives us. And so with that said, moving on in the presentation, that was a little, I ate up a couple extra minutes, I'll make that up later. Okay, so we have this concept called sustainable development. And as I'm talking to you, I want to make sure we define that term. It's important that we all are on the same page relative to terms. And as I'm making this comment, I'm going to ask Brenda Mack, our illustrious speaker, to come up, and she's going to be adding some commentary around that. And I'm going to ask her to introduce herself. Of the people that are here, she's probably least known to everybody. Sustainable development, rather than get into a class or a lecture about what sustainable is, let me just say this. Sustainable development is a term that came out of a United Nations program, which came out of an effort called Our Common Future. A lot of people roll their eyes when they hear the term Agenda 21, but that term came out of this concept called Agenda 21, which was signed off on by our government in 1992 by George H.W. Bush. The basic fundamental purpose of that is to spread the wealth, is to create balance, is to protect the environment globally. And what they mean by that is take it from the America and give it to the rest of the world. That's protecting the environment. And so sustainable development, I'm really ticked off because that term was stolen from me. For my entire life, I've been an environmentalist. I hunt. I want to have deer around for me to shoot and eat. I want to have pheasants around that I can shoot and eat. I want to be able to enjoy property. I take care of the property that I live on. I don't want to pollute my stream. I want to be able to take care of it so I have some place to fish. All of us think sustainable development. There aren't too many. Is there anybody in here that wants to destroy their property that they live on that they paid for? I'm checking. No? Don't see any hands go up. So I think everybody in here wants sustainable development. I don't want somebody telling me what that means and how to do it. Would you agree with that? So, this is a definition that comes right out. You can read it. World's poor, to override the partner should be given, and the idea of the limitations imposed by the state. Imposed by the state. Just take that thought away with you. So, the state wants to impose restrictions on you to implement the sustainable development. And some of those restrictions involve a term called social justice and environmental justice, which I think Brenda is well versed on, and I'm going to ask her to come up and speak about. Brenda Mack.
Good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you for coming out on this Saturday morning. I think it's cold out. If I wasn't here, I'd be home in my pajama clothes under the blankets watching Gunsmoke. Where people had their land and they were able to do with it what they wanted to. They wanted to live in a shack, they could live in a shack. If they wanted to live in the city, in Dodge City, they could live there. They had choice. The government reminds me of a bad laundry. The bigger the government gets, the more choices it makes for us, the smaller we get as people. We shrink and shrink and shrink. So we can't let that happen anymore, can we? We have to do something about this. I'm in a very bad spot here, so I'm going to walk. I hope you don't mind. Sustainable. What have you lost? How many of you, and I know most of you are going to raise your hand, want to sustain what you have? Okay? You've worked hard for your homes, you've worked hard for your land, whatever it is, you've worked hard for it. Some of your parents worked hard for what you have, but it's yours. And you want to sustain that. You want to keep it. You don't want me moving in beside you and taking part of what you have. It's yours. If you want to give it to me, that's okay, because that's your choice. But bottom line is, you want to sustain what you have. And you want to keep your choice, your right to choose, Because that's a sustainable thing too, isn't it? Isn't it? Now, I want this like church now. I want to hear some amens and hallelujahs and praise the Lord. I'm cold up here. Literally, I'm cold. So I want you guys to heat this up a little bit. The government has it twisted. I feel that this is a way for the government, another way for the government, to quietly push people on us that we don't want. I do not want to make this a racial thing, I do not. But I believe that part of the underlying reasons is that the government wants to push races together, which is fine. I'm all for cultures and races being together, and a lot of you know me. You know that that's how I feel. But there are a lot of people who do not want to live together. Can you imagine, Judge, you're home. I know it's nice. I bet it's warm in there too. Can you imagine if Ray, the drug dealer, comes and lives right beside you? Because the government has pushed him out in his business, the only business he knows, the only way he knows how to live, and he comes and lives beside you. You think of it that way? This is serious. This is serious. If you take away my choice, you take away my freedom. Amen. If you take away my freedom, you take away my choice. We have to keep our choice. I can't explain what I need to explain without wavering off these two subjects, Skip, and I'm sorry, I can't help it, so you'll have to scold me later. But I want to know what is going to happen as communities shrink. There's this gentleman here. As communities shrink, why will we need elected officials in different communities? If the communities are shrinking, what's going to happen to elected officials? We don't need them anymore. If we don't need them, then we need more of us. Okay? I mean, if the elected officials now, and they who agree with this thing, we don't need them. What do they need to be in office for if this fully takes place? We don't need them. So everybody, let's get rid of them. Don't re-elect them. You know how I feel. Those of you who know me. If this is what they want, if they want to take away your choice and take away the things that you have sustained in life, you do not need them. Remember that in 2014 and 2016. What's going to happen to the people who do not know how to live outside of their areas where they live now? I need you to look at me as I talk to you. This upsets me so bad. What's going to happen to them? There are people who are undereducated, underinformed, who have no idea, who are absolutely fearful of living anywhere but where they live, who can't afford to live anywhere else. What are they going to do? You said yourself there's not going to be any government housing at all. Where will these poor people go? Where will they live? Where are they going to go? There's not going to be any government housing. I don't agree with government housing, only on a temporary basis. But where will they go? If they need permanent housing, where will Tina go with 4 children who is undereducated, underinformed, or not informed? Where's she going to live with those 4 kids? There's no government housing. She has no skills, she can't work. Where's she going to live? I think you guys need to redo this whole thing if you're going to try to continue with it. There's a saying that says, give me liberty or give me death. Judge, I know you like that one, because you spoke about liberty. You take my liberty away. you might as well kill me. This is America, the United States of America. We are not like other countries where we want to live by government say so. I mean, people, come on. I honestly am ashamed to say that I don't know when all this started. But anything that started can be stopped. So I would encourage you to continue on and you know, inform people, let this know that people know that this is going on. I saw a video earlier that said the best way that you can get this out is go viral. Do it. Do it. We have to stop President Obama from completing his plans before he moves on. Once he completes his plans, that's what I'm talking about. I love you. 1955 to 1968, we fought. My people fought for civil rights, civil justice, all of us, whether we were born or not, was involved in some way or another, because somewhere along our bloodline, people were involved in it. And people died, people lost, because they wanted choice. My people wanted choice, and you want choice. So let's keep this movement going. Let's get some spirit. Let's get some zeal inside here and make this thing even a bigger movement than we had a movement in the 1950s and 1960s. We can stop this thing. We can stop this thing. You want to sustain what you have. You want to have liberty. You want to have choice. If you want to live as free Americans, free in Ohio, keep your movement going. Skip, I will send it over to you.
Thank you. Isn't she good? Isn't she good? Yes. Absolutely. Now, she is. This is phenomenal. I was just sent a text that says we're going way over time. If we go over time, am I going to have your permission to do that? I'm going to accelerate this a little bit because we need to pick up the pace a little bit because, and I'm terrible at time boxing, I apologize. I can go on and on for hours. So with that said, we have a couple of other topics, and I'm going to invite Alex Kellerman to come up and talk about regionalism versus collaboration, because there is a huge difference. And by the way, I am so sorry that somebody stole that word regionalism from us too, and they've contorted it. And Alex, I think, is going to talk about that.
Thank you, Skip. You know, when Skip originally asked me to talk, he didn't tell me I was going to be following two speakers of this caliber, so I really have to apologize if I let you guys down here. 4 years ago, I was basically in the audience like you, and I was interested. I went to a seminar about regionalism because I wanted to know a little bit more about it. And at the time, I thought it was all those things you see over on the on your right-hand side of the screen. And so when we hear a lot of people talking today about regionalism is bad, I have to tell you quite frankly, it makes me wince, and it's one of the things that Skip and I discussed, because like sustainability, it's a word that really was kind of taken away from us. Because I went to that seminar originally thinking that it was about all those things, about collaborating, working together, about governments basically looking to see areas that they can do more efficiently, to share some of their resources. You hear the stories about the two fire stations that are across the street from each other in neighboring communities. They both have the big fire truck, the pumper truck, or the aerial ladder. You've got maybe some departments that now, because of computerization or some other things, they don't need to have as much staff as they do. And so these are areas that really, as a citizen, I was interested in. But when I started going to some of the meetings about this, I realized at that time, the thing they're talking about is more what you see on the left-hand side of the screen, about tax sharing across communities, taking local taxes that you raise in one place and basically saying, well, those aren't really your taxes, those belong to everybody else, to the entire region. It's not fair that you have growth in one area and they don't have it in another. Or that it's not fair that you're growing in one place, and if they look at growth as a zero-sum game. If you have growth in Streetsboro, then that means it's something that's lost in Cleveland. And so that's why I started being involved in this, and by way of introduction, that's how I got here, is I started going to my local MPO, AMATS, in the Akron area. I became vice chair of that committee. I was there for 2 years, and 2 years later, I was elected to council in Hudson. And as a council member, I see all these things. I hear regionalism, like the state is pushing it on us. They're saying you need to do regionalism, but I don't think they're talking about the same thing necessarily that NEOSCC is bringing us. They're talking about the things on the right-hand side of the screen. And so when we talk about it today, for the purposes of discussion, we can go ahead and bash regionalism from the standpoint of that other side. But I think that my message is really that you should ask your local officials, your state officials, to really be looking at the other ends, because that's what we really need to be focusing on, to see the areas that we can work efficiently. 4 years ago, when I asked the question in the audience, why aren't you talking about collaboration? The answer was, well, you know what, that's too hard. And I have to tell you, as a local official, that's right, it is too hard. You get a lot of pushback. You get a lot of pushback from your local governments. It's like anything else in business, there's a lot of inertia. People don't want to change. They're going to say, well, we tried that. It doesn't work because of this or because of that. There's a number of reasons that they don't want to basically collaborate, or they don't want to give up turf. So really, as citizens, you really need to push your local officials to say, are you working more effectively the next time you come along and want to buy another piece of equipment or expand in a new area, to say, are there other ways you can do it more efficiently? Because I think those are all good things. So that's basically my message today, is that regionalism is, can be good, but it's not in the terms of what you've been seeing most of today. The other portion of the message, and we'll get into this a little bit further, is to the defense of local officials, and that there aren't very many here today. We haven't really been told a lot about this, and I think that's really by design. I mean, the people that are members by the charter, and you can see this next slide, are basically half of the 33 organizations are non-governmental organizations. They're planning, policy think tanks, they're universities. There isn't a single councilman that sits on any of the executive boards of anything. We're really not engaged on a local level at all. And so I could say that there's some of us know about it. We really haven't been, and we'll go into the reasons why, I think, a little bit further in the presentation. Turn it back to you, Skip.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you, Alex. And Alex, if anybody wants to know about regionalism, they want to talk regionalism, let me tell you something. We've had hours of conversations about this. Take a look at the board here. Who's driving? Take a look at who the executive board members are for NEOSCC. And what you're going to see is a lot of MPOs. Hence, take a look at the chart over there. Who are the MPOs governed by? There's a federal law that governs the MPOs. It's called MAP 21. Barbara Boxter drafted that law. Do I need to say any more? Okay, I've read the law, it's 16 pages long. If you're looking for something fun to do at night, you get a glass of wine, you sit down and you read MAP 21. It's so much fun. All right, with that said, and so the question here is, where are the people's representatives? We're continually told that this is a plan by Northeastern Ohio. And yet every time we've tried to speak up at a forum, we've been shut down because they're orchestrated, they're coordinated, and it doesn't fit with the plan. Where are the elected officials? And what are the impact on elected officials? And with that said, this is, by the way, the continuing list of board members for NEOSCC. Notice who tends to be sitting in the seats. It's the Transit Authority, the Fund for Economic Future, that's a really good organization. The Prosperity Initiative, the Akron Metropolitan Housing Authority. Do any of those people represent you? No, I think not. So I'm still looking for the representatives that represent Northeastern Ohio. And so, but it does impact the representatives in North. Every elected official will be impacted by this. And so I was kind of curious at how elected officials might feel about that. So I invited Mr. Matt Lynch, or State Representative Matt Lynch from the 76th South District, one of the good guys down in Columbus by that wanted a few good guys, to come up here and tell us about how elected officials might do this.
I'm going to mess up Skip's system up here. Hey, thanks so much for being here, and what a great turnout. You know, Thomas Jefferson said that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And so it's so incredibly important for all of you to be here today and to be involved and to continue on this fight. And I have to point out that Tom Z from the Portage County Tea Party is here. Wave, Tom. Doing great work down there. And my role here today is not to address so much the specifics of what Mr. Morrison's organization is doing, but rather the process. Because I am an elected official. I was a township trustee and then ran for the House of Representatives in seats well worn by Tim and Diane Grindell for years before me. And I felt, I thought, I believed that my role was to represent the citizens of my district, the citizens of, in this case, Geauga and Portage County. And that I was the one to make decisions about how the money is to be spent, how growth might occur, what was best for our citizens, as reflected by what the citizens would tell me they wanted. And so it's frightening to think about the alphabet soup of organizations, and Skip had the list up there a moment ago, that are now participating in not only spending your money, but deciding how you're going to live in the future. And I don't know, I think Hunter and I may have met before, I'm not sure, but frankly, frightens the hell out of me. If any of you have read Mark Levin's book, Ameritopia, now, the premise of that book is that the experts are going to run the country. Because, you know, they know better than we do. And they're going to show us. And Hunter, when you had your display up there, all this data, you know, I mean, that's really impressive data, and especially the pie charts, although you really should do it in color because I'm colorblind. Yeah. So it is important, I think, to understand that that's not the constitutional process, to have these other agencies. NEOSCC, as some of you may know, is a private organization. It's a nonprofit organization funded with your tax dollars, but it's a private organization. And the members of the board are not responsible to you directly. They're responsible, I suppose, to each other. But it's an organization that's going to do a lot more than just collect data, which is what was shown you earlier. And I encourage you just to read their own words. If you go to their website, particularly talking about Vibrant Neo 2040. You know, Vibrant Neo 2040, doesn't that sound great? 2040, 30 years from now. I can't get the weatherman to tell me if it's going to rain tomorrow. But these experts are going to tell us how the growth is going to occur, how it should occur, and it's going to be best for you. So in their own materials, they say that they're going to lead us to a healthier, more economically and socially equitable future. Now, does that sound like some judgments are being made there? That someone's deciding what's more equitable, what's less equitable? You know, when I go home tonight, my wife is going to talk to me about what's going to be equitable in my house. And I'll listen to her, but I'm not sure I want a private, non-profit agency funded by tax dollars to tell me what's going to be more equitable. Certainly I don't want that as an individual. And Hunter, you stumbled over your words at one point, and I think let it out when you said, I think I got this quote right, growth benefits all of us, but not to the same degree. See, that's the problem. We have to have equity. We have to have fairness. And by golly, the government's going to decide what's fair. Well, not in my world. In my experience in Columbus, I learned very quickly, involving an issue over Portage County, the incredible arrogance that agencies can adopt. Of course, I was dealing with one of the most arrogant agencies, the EPA. And so when you speak to them, they actually believe that somehow they have a power into themselves. But listen to these words from the NEO 2040 website. They're to develop a roadmap that needs to be followed. Not should be followed or be a good idea to follow. It needs to be followed. It will be a plan that we all need to implement to ensure the consortium members have brought into Vibrant NEO 2040 and carry forth its vision. NEOSCC will seek the approval of Vibrant 2040 Governing Board. In other words, they're going to create a vision. They're going to have workshops and this, but this is going to be their vision, not your vision. And that's a frightening thing to me. There's a section under their goals, and I encourage you to read their goals. It's entitled Reflect Shared Values. You know what? I doubt we could get shared values in this room. And I think a lot of us think alike. But I guarantee you that when someone says that they're going to implement on a top-down program shared values, that by golly, I'm going to disagree with some of those values. And I am not prepared to let some non-government, non-elected bureaucrat decide what my shared values should be. And I'm pushing a lot of this aside in the interest of time, but let me just say that they refer here under its values again. This is NEOSCC values, that they believe in a public visioning process. You know, if one of my kids came to me and said, you know, Dad, we need a more public visioning process. You know, what the heck does that mean? You know, there is a public visioning process, though. It's called the United States Constitution. When I go out in public, I often wear these two pins you see me wearing. One is my pin from the Ohio House of Representatives, and the other is a flag. It's a U.S. and Ohio flag pin. And that's because when I was elected township trustee and when I was later elected to the Ohio House of Representatives, I took an oath to the U.S. and Ohio constitutions that my decisions would reflect those values and that process. And I am not interested in some other public visioning process, because I was elected to reflect those values. If I'm not going to be reflecting those values and implementing what my citizens expect from me, then, as was absolutely properly said, I might as well go home. And legislators that defer the decision-making process to non-government organizations, no matter how well-intended and high-minded sounded, are simply not doing their job. And I want to finish with a little bit of detail, very quickly, about the Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium, which, according to their financial records, through 2013, spent $1.5 million on salaries. Now, if you want to know what I make, you can look it up. I make $62,500 a year for being your state representative. I lose money every day I work for you. I'll tell you that right now. If I practice law, I do much better. I want to know what Hunter Morrison makes, because you're paying for it. When we get to Q&A, I'd like to answer that question. Because I am not prepared to fund through tax dollars, and that's what we're doing, whether it's through state or federal tax dollars, the careers of city planners who do not have my shared vision in mind. Their 2013, or the June 2013 financial report listed a number of organizations that they're spending money off to. And folks, this is an old pattern now in this country. It's 50 years old. The feds provide the cash. They entice the local communities to participate with matching grant monies. That's what they do. Sometimes they provide 50, 75, 90% of the grant money. You just kick in a little bit and you get something for it. So who are we sending money to? The Akron Urban League? Catholic Charities, you know, I kind of like Catholic Charities, but we're supposed to be sending money to them? Something called the Policy Bridge. Or how about the Regional Prosperity Initiative? What do you think those guys are doing with your money? I want to conclude with a statement from Representative Ron Young. I know many of you know Ron Young from Lake County. He couldn't be here today. He's one of my heroes in the House. But he sent me an email and he said, Matt, would you read this to the group for me? And I said, sure, because I couldn't say this any better myself, and with this I'll conclude. From Ron Young, he says, the modern form of regionalism is at its core a new form of an age-old disease that governments all too often contract, that being taxation and dictation without representation. Unelected bureaucrats with almost no accountability to the people and far too much power are enacting rules and regulations that limit our freedoms, restrict our rights to property, and often run counter to our Constitution. If left unchecked, this state and nation are in serious danger of ensnarement in a web of confusing and convoluted government controls that could make the protections and freedoms afforded in America's representative constitutional republic of no effect. This is a critical issue. These harmful efforts to regionalize our society must be confronted and defeated, and I might say we, will continue to resist regionalism at every opportunity. Thank you so much.
So we're going to have a contest later to determine who you like better. Because it's close. It's running really close to me. Did Matt do a great job? Okay, now, we said we were going to get to questions and answers. I'm going to run as quickly as I can through a couple of points. We're going to bypass a lot of the slides in there, but there's just a few I want to touch on quickly. And then we're going to get to the question and answer period to give you a chance to ask questions of the panel members. So real quick, I'm going to buzz through a couple of these. We already talked about who's in control a bit. We talked about, I think Britta talked a little bit about this. And by the way, I'd like to ask you, I'm filing a question away for me, Hunter, when we get up here. How do we know when we got the vibrant? I just want to know that. And what does that mean? I mean, I think Northeastern Ohio has always been vibrant. We've always been resilient. We've always managed to stay. I'd like to know when we get there. I'm a business guy. I want to know how you measure vibrant. I'm sure it will. Okay, we've already talked about a lot of this stuff. Here is the national plan for HUD. HUD, the Department of Transportation, and an EPA. We heard from transportation yesterday. They want you on bicycles and mass transit. They have a plan, and all the green areas there, or the gray areas actually, are those areas in which they have this kind of effort funded and going on. You see all the dots up there? This is going off across the nation. And this is a little excerpt out of one of their documents online. This is where they want to get you, into mega regions. This is not a small plan. This is a big plan. This president said he wanted to transform America. America is being transformed. Thank God that you're here today. I wanted to see this room packed out. It's pretty full. But more people need to know about this. More people need to be woken up to this, and it's going to be up to you to help us with that. Okay. By the way, if you think government can't have an impact, how many of you live in Cuyahoga County? Anybody live in Cuyahoga County? I'm sure you're going to love being taxed for rainwater. That is just, and by the way, that was not a law passed, that was a court judgment. I just want to pass that and just make that statement to you. Okay, we talked about this. Well, I'm going to make a few brief statements and we're going to cruise through these slides. You know who NEOSCC is if you look at their grant application and at the grant that they took. Go online to HUD and look up Sustainable Development Grant. That grant has specific requirements. When you take that money, HUD says you will accomplish these things. Look at what HUD tells these organizations they must accomplish. And I happen to have circled a couple. The other thing that you might, and this is an important one, that you might be aware of is when the grant application was submitted, NEOSCC made a statement, a number of statements, and I've got a copy of their grant application and I will send it to anybody that's interested. But I found this one particularly telling. Historic patterns of development have not led to an equal distribution, and that's our goal, equal distribution, fairness for all, from each according to his need, to each according to his ability. Oh, who said that? I'm sorry, I'm diverging. So, historic patterns of development have not led to an equal distribution of community amenities or access to jobs, education, neighborhood services, open space, transit, municipal programs. This has resulted in disparities in health, income, food access, education, employment options. This is something that I know Brenda, I just know she can speak to this, because this is a hot spot for her. Our regional planning efforts will identify, they're telling HUD, this is what we will do. NEOSCC is telling HUD, when we take your money, this is what we will do. We will identify how best to deploy resources to address this historic inequities. Isn't that interesting? Share the wealth, we gotta create balance from each according to his need to each according to his ability. And so that is extremely telling. If we do not wake up our neighbors and tell them the root change that's occurring, we get the seeds we plant. Okay, this is a solution looking for a plan, just file that away. There's a number of slides I'd love to get into that have to do with the disconnected communities, which are referred to as townships and counties and cities. I'll just talk about that whole disconnected, a plan looking for a solution looking for a plan. They have the solution, they just want to create the plan for it. And so this is another, out of the grant application. These are some more tidbits out of the grant application. I think the last one kind of tells it all, so I won't spend any time there. Okay, here is a great one. Thank you, Alex, for this. This talks about some of the results. You're going to see a lot of results published by NEOSCC. I'm going to ask you, because I consider this crowd to have a good critical thinking skills. Okay? And so you need to critically look at a lot of the data and the methodology that's been produced. This is one of the slides, and the line items that are in there, you'll see the distributions from the population that they had. They have this number of respondents, and then they kind of divide up this chart accordingly. And so the numbers of people who want to relax government regulations on development, higher residential densities in my community. So they're saying, oh, we want more people in our communities. I find that pretty interesting. And we want to share local tax revenues regionally. When you rob Peter to pay Paul, Peter's going to be pretty much in favor, I'm thinking. What do you think? Or no, Paul. Paul's going to be in favor. If you rob Peter to pay Paul, Paul's going to be all over that one. Oh yeah, I'm for that. We got a lot of Pauls around. Okay, there's some more. Look at the numbers of people we're talking about. You're making decisions based on 51 people. Come on, give me a break. And now here's one that we had on a board outside, because we just love this one. Who is driving this vote? 223 people in Cleveland, making the decision for 4 million people in northeastern Ohio, or the 9 people that showed up in Geauga County. By the way, of that 9 people, I think I can see many of us in this audience, and we weren't in favor, and we spoke up, but they didn't register that. And here's a great one. Cost of outward migration. There is a cost to us moving into the suburbs. To who? A lot of questions to be asked on that one. And by the way, here is your bicycle and pedestrian investment at work. And we'll be making more of this because of our move toward bicycles and mass transit. And around, January, February, I want to ask you how you feel about that bicycle travel thing going on. Okay? because I think that's going to work out well for us. I want to point out to you, by the way, if you look at these routes, they align with a lot of our park systems. If you look at a different initiative, for those people who are the Tin Hat Gen 21 people, there are wildlife corridors that kind of correspond to those paths. I'll just point that out to you. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that. This is similar themes. Government picking winners. Matt did a great job of talking about that, the housing communities. And so, let's see here. Okay, we talked about most of this, so I'm not even going to get into that. With that, we'll go ahead and we'll get into the question and answer period now to give you guys an opportunity to ask some questions. Here's the way this is going to work. If you want a question, if you want to ask a question, you need to come down to Linda. Linda's got a microphone, and so you ask the question to Linda. We're going to ask that you limit your question for the sake of time. We don't need people speechifying. Just ask a short, concise question, and then the board will respond to it. So, as people are getting ready to do that, I'm going to ask the members, or all the speakers, including Hunter, to come up to the table. We're going to take questions, and then we'll answer those. And after the question and answer period, we'll go for probably half an hour or so, and then we're going to talk about next steps, and then we'll be done. Is anybody going to stay awake tonight? I'm going to be staring at the ceiling. Okay. By the way, we have some really good folks running for office shortly. Linda, who's handling the mics, is one of those. She's in South Russell if you want to help her get elected. Oh, Russell, I'm sorry. I always confuse those two. Russell. And so, if you want to change the direction, we need to focus on getting elected, good people like Matt and Ron and some other folks. Okay, with that said, I'm shutting up. Go ahead, Linda, it's on you.
Testing, good, here we are.
Diana Fisher from Moreland Hills. And the question is to anybody who can answer this, how do we go about defunding this NEOSCC?
Well, it's a federal problem, as I alluded to in my remarks there. They were funded through a federal grant program, and maybe Hunter will tell you how to pull the plug on his funding. I suspect not. But we have to have elected officials in Washington that will actually address the issue of what I call the shadow government, which is operating every day in the state agencies and private agencies.
How do you defund it? Exposure. Tell somebody. Tell everybody. That's what you do. That this is not constitutional. That's what you do.
One comment on that. They're actually coming to the end of their funding cycle. I think that's true. And so they're going to be asking for more funding. The NPOs are at the heart of this. The NPOs are driving this. They got together and coalesced to create an NEOSCC because they wanted to expand their power and scope. That's my opinion. May not be factual, but that's my opinion on it. They can only do roads and bridges and some environmental stuff. This is much, much broader than that. And so they're going to be seeking more funding, and what you need to do is reach out to your representatives and let them know, no, this should not be continued, and by the way, your elected officials need to get informed on this stuff.
I just wanted to give one other comment. I'm not sure, are there any people here from Lake County? Okay, great. Lake County is considering joining, I don't know if the last minutes I saw, are joining. They are not currently members of NEOSCC. Each of the members that you saw there contributed $50,000, and the county government, $50,000 is not a lot of money. But Lake County is considering joining, so you may want to ask your county commissioners at this late date what the heck they're thinking.
And if I can add, for those of you from Jaga County, ask the county commissioners there the same question.
And ask your county commissioners from Jaga County where they weren't here today, because they were invited by me twice. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, there you go. All right, Mary, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. Mary Speedy is here. Anybody else here? No? All right, I apologize. All right, go ahead, next question.
Lois Irene Blumberg, Independence, Ohio.
This is for Mr. Hunter Morrison. On your slide that you had land, lane miles for the roads. You had 3,100 new miles, 6,000, and then 700 and 2,400 miles based upon each scenario. My question is, how are those lane miles calculated? Because if you say you're having 4 lanes, are you counting that as 4 miles, or is that 1 mile? Because this is very misleading, and this was brought up in the first workshop and the second workshop, and it was ignored. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an important technical question. A lane mile is what transportation planners use to define, the extent of a road. So 1 lane mile would be half a mile with a 2-lane road, quarter mile with a 4-lane road. It's a way of being able to look at whether you're talking about a freeway or a 2-lane road. They reduce it to lane miles, so it's essentially 1 mile of 1 lane of roadway. Say what? No, what you're saying is that there's, I think, 4,000 lane miles. That would be 1,000 miles of a 4-lane highway. A lane mile is just a unit of measurement. I apologize if it confuses folks. It's the way the transportation planners balance things.
Mr. Lynch, hello again. I was just with Mr. Lynch the other night. My name is Khalid Nomar of Warrensville. I am the co-host of the new conservative talk show on 1330. I've invited Mr. Lynch to come on to talk about, it's called the Todd Allen Show, 1330 a.m. And Mr. Lynch wants to come on and talk about this very disturbing agenda. I would like to invite one or more of you to come on and talk about this. We need to get this out there. We reach Geauga, Cuyahoga, and Lake counties. So I would love to get you after the event to come on and talk about this. We reach 3 counties, Lake Geauga, and Cuyahoga, 900,000 homes. So please do talk to me afterwards, and I would love to have you all come on and really let people know about this. 13:30 a.m. on Thursdays, Todd Allen Show, the Todd Allen Show, ALLYN, 13:30 a.m., WEOW, on Thursdays, 4 to 5. Hello, Mr. Tasker.
Hello, my name is Kathy Davis. I live in Mahoning County, which is down the roadways. In the Youngstown area, I have personally sent some information to our county sheriff and to some of our elected officials. And I know I'm probably not the only one here that does that, and this question might be for Matt. What is the most effective way to reach the elected officials and to, get them on board? What's the best way?
Thanks. It's been an interesting experience to go from a town hall as a trustee to a state legislator, because it's completely different. And this is one reason why we need local government, because when you go to your local town hall for their weekly or bi-weekly meetings, or you go to your county commissioner meetings in person, that is by far the most effective thing you can do. When I was a township trustee, there were 3 trustees. I used to refer to the audience as the 4th trustee, because they really guide you in your thinking, as they should. When I got down to Columbus, pretty much all I see are lobbyists and other legislators, other politicians, and that's frustrating. The best way is always in person. Emails, of course, are always good, and phone calls are good, and not, frankly, that an individual legislator is going to see that email or hear that phone call, but in the accumulation of it, we have people that count them. This person's for it, this person's against it, you sort of get a total. So that can be helpful as a large group, but if you have a chance to go there in person, that's always really the best approach.
I have a second thought. Wherever the local grocery store is, wherever the local barber shop is, they have to shop eventually, they have to get their hair cut. Get them in a barber chair, they got no place to go. You know, they go to church, you catch them outside the church parking lot. You can find them in the restaurant. They're human, they're available, they're accessible. You don't stalk them, just find them and exercise your First Amendment rights. I do want to add one other footnote. There's several hundred people here today. You know, if you all wrote a letter to the editor, to your local paper about your views on this, you might make an impact. I'll just leave that as a suggestion.
Let me make one other suggestion to you. The NPOs are driving. NEOSCC is an example. I'm most familiar with it. I happen to sit on the board as an alternate. They allow individuals to come to a NEOSCC meeting and speak for 3 minutes. Most of the time, the board members who are sitting around that table could care less what you're saying, because they're wanting you to get done as quickly as you can so that they can go about doing whatever they're doing. So they're texting and they're on their iPad and so on and so forth. And they will not, NEOSCC will not allow you to make any comment or ask any questions beyond that 3-minute comment. And I don't know how you would know what questions to ask if you've not heard what they're presenting and so on and so forth. And they are now taking their monthly meetings now to quarterly meetings, I think in an effort to reduce transparency and visibility. I think you need to get a hold of your elected officials, county commissioners, city, county engineer, and so on and so forth. Let them know you want to be heard. You need to show up at your NPO meeting and say, you know, it is irresponsible. The citizen, you work for the citizens. We pay your check. By the way, the people that run the NPOs are unelected, unaccountable. There is a board of elected individuals, but the people that run that organization is unelected and unaccountable. And they got a $7 million budget, and it's increasing, and they want it to increase. So if you do things like that, there are people in this room, I know that because you attended the NEOSCC meetings, and you speak up, it will resonate if you get enough people there.
Mary Mumper from Stowe. My question is, I'm concerned that Governor Kasich is allowing this, and would Ohio, would it have sovereignty over what the federal government's doing? And all of our elected officials, such as my mayor, who's going along with sustainable development, would she be able to be removed from office because she is not supporting her constitutional oath that she took?
Of course, the best way to remove her from office is to unelect her next time at the ballot box. So that's number one. You know, it's a very complex problem. I don't know where Susan is here, but we were having an interesting argument before this discussion just before we started about some federal issues, and they're clearly unconstitutional, and we should just ignore them. Governor Kasich is not implementing through the Federal Department of Transportation, this program through NEOSCC and NEOSCC. But it's certainly true that local governments, including state governments, cooperate in the process. And you know, again, I mentioned this is not a new scenario. When they offer the money, politicians, legislators, mayors, township trustees want to take the money. And so, whether frankly it's Obamacare or Common Core, it's part of the same problem. It's the money being used to seduce us into giving up our liberty. So it's not certainly something that's on the governor's plate at the moment, I would guess. And as you know, there are those that want to get all the federal money they can because, well, after all, to go someplace else. That's the argument. It's a false argument. It's a false argument.
I just want to jump in for a moment, because one of the points we didn't have a chance to get into in the presentation is, if you're going to focus your efforts on government officials, I really think, in all due deference to former and current members, you ought to be doing it at the state level, not so much at the local level. The reason being that they need some fundamental changes in state law to get a lot of what you saw here passed. Right now, the kinds of things they're talking about sharing local revenue, doing the planning, those have to be changes that are made in the state. And as an illustration of that, we mentioned briefly the water tax. I can tell you personally, we experienced that in Hudson. That was because of a state law that was written 40 years ago that addressed sanitary sewers. That led to an interpretation by the judges was referenced there, that also involved stormwater. Now, in Hudson, we had some severe flooding in 2003. We lost 2 of our citizens to that. We put steps in place to address that. That didn't matter to the judge. He wanted us as part of that group. So now there are people in Hudson who pay effectively twice for the same drop of water. They pay once to us, they pay the other time to the other group, which basically, I believe the number is like 75% of that money goes to the overall group. So most of that flooding that they're talking about is being handled in Cuyahoga County. But all this would have happened, our attorneys told us, had the state law not been changed. And the judge and I were talking about the will of getting those kinds of things changed, and it really doesn't exist too much in Columbus. My fear on all this is that an innocent-looking state law will be written that will say you should allow sharing, you should allow planning. And then what's going to happen is they'll take that little eye of the needle and they'll thread those requirements right through there for us, whether that's on the federal level or whether it's on the regional level. A lot of the grants that we receive as local communities come with a lot of strings on them, as was alluded to earlier, not just ones from NEOSCC or from the MPOs. But they can put those kinds of requirements on there and if the state law allows it. So really that's where I think you need to focus your efforts on. And really, again, not so much talk with them, are you against regionalism? Because I think if you ask most people down at the State House, they'll say, oh sure, regionalism sounds good, we should be sharing and collaborating. But I think if you ask them, are you in favor of centralized planning? Are you in favor of sharing our local revenues? Your local school taxes that you raise in one community, that you go out and campaign for, it's shared with another community who doesn't pass a levy for decades. That's really what the issue is, and that can't happen right now. But if you have a pliable state legislature that turns over regularly because they have term limits, and you have some very good lobbyists and groups like Greater Ohio who are down there and telling these guys this is the way it's supposed to happen, and let me tell you how to help, and I'll help you write these laws. There's really not a balance. It's us, the citizens, that really have to balance that by getting at the state legislators and telling them the dangers.
Let me suggest the alternative. It's all 3 levels. You need to talk to your local officials. For example, why, if most of us in Geauga County don't want to be pulled into a region, are our county talking about or participating in any sort of regional discussion? Then you got to talk to the state people for the very reason that the good councilman just mentioned. A lot of this can't be done unless the state legislature allows it to happen. But having said that, if you listen to Rush Limbaugh, I don't remember if it was Wednesday or Thursday afternoon when I was driving to Columbus, he says that HUD at the federal level is trying to get a federal regulation that would allow HUD to cancel all local zoning ordinances if those zoning ordinances do not meet diversity desires of the HUD people. So while we're talking about small potatoes here, there's some folks in Washington who've got the big banana that they're looking at. I would just tell you that's probably unconstitutional. However, I'm sure there's some liberal federal judge who probably thinks I don't know what the Constitution says, because the Constitution in his mind is a living, breathing document. I don't think that's true, but I think the answer is you got to be vigilant on all 3 levels. But I will tell you this, you have several hundred people here today, none of you get paid. None of you get paid to be involved in this issue. There's a lot of people, some of whom you saw on the wall there, who get paid every day to fight this issue in the opposite direction. As the council member, there's lobbyists in Columbus who get paid every day to advance this agenda. There's lobbyists in Washington who get paid every day to advance this agenda. And the problem is you have to find time in your life when you're working to pay your taxes and raise your children and take care of your family to help fight against all those paid people. I don't tell you this to discourage you, I tell you this because you have to. You are the patriots sitting in this room today, and if you're not willing to give of yourself to fight this battle, we can't overtake those people who are being paid in the opposite direction.
Basically, I'm saying the same thing that you're saying, Judge. However, people, we must realize that we truly hold all the power right here in our hand, right here in our mouth, okay? This hand pulls that lever, punches that button at the election, Board of Elections. Wherever you vote, at home, wherever you do, that's the power you have. People don't want to, the local level, to me, is the most powerful. They can put pressure on the state level. Could you imagine if the state level did not have the support of our local politicians? If the local politicians don't have your support, okay? It's not rocket science, it's not hard. Okay? We have the power over the local politicians. Local politicians can pull their support or give their support to the state level. So we need to remember that.
And one comment to add to that, support your Liberty group, your Tea Party groups, your 912 groups. Tom Z is here from Portage County today. I can tell you that they are having an impact. I mean, this would not have happened outside of the donors who did a fantastic job. Had we not had some Liberty group participation, and we had a number of volunteers that you met out there in the hallway, they volunteered their time. And I can tell you, Kim and I invested a huge amount of time in putting this together along with the people that are in our group. And so support your Liberty groups because they're the only ones out there paying attention right now and they need your help. There was another comment, but I lost it, so never mind. Go ahead.
Skip, it's now 3 o'clock, so should we try to limit our conversation by
Well,
question?
we had permission to go another 15 minutes. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, another 15 minutes, and then we'll continue.
Very good.
I'm David Macco from Solon. I'm the 14th District Representative of the Libertarian Party of Ohio Central Committee. Mr. Morrison, I'm directing the question to you, but everyone else can answer also. On your questionnaire, you used the term investment twice, transportation investment and investment in communities. Are you using the normal everyday dictionary definition of investment, where people voluntarily use their own money to provide goods or services, or to lend that money to someone else who will create some good or service? Or are you using it the way the politicians, bureaucrats, and other parasites use it to suck money from our wallets by the Fed government, the state government, the county government, the state government, and the rest of these thieves, to either squander it or to enslave us?
Skip said good luck. The language of investment, of public sector investment or public sector expenditure, this is your tax dollars being invested in your communities to make them better. And the question becomes, really, are we getting, as communities, our return on investment? And the purpose of the scenario planning effort is to look at how we're spending our money, what we're getting out of it, and whether overall our communities are better off or worse off. That's what we're looking at. But yes, that's a term, it's a little bit like lane miles, it's a term that is often used in the public sector, the way it is with the private sector. Return on investment is differently calculated, but basically people need to see that their money is well spent. We're doing well with public's money, which is entrusted to government to expend on behalf of folks.
Hi, my name is Sue Bondra, and I've been a homeowner and mentor for 26 years. I walked in today not knowing what I was coming to. I didn't even know what regionalism was or anything, so I've been well educated on that. My question is, I have 3 children, 22, 23, and 25, recent college graduates still living at home, and I've been tweeting throughout this whole thing. I would like 3 talking points that I can take home to that generation to get them interested in this. So I'm hoping that, and my lunch group friends, who I am the most political person, you know, we're all 50, turning 50, and, you know, they are not informed at election time. So when they asked me what I went to today, I'm still learning this whole process, but can you throw out 3 things that I can take back and start a dialogue with my 20-something children?
Their freedom is jeopardized. That's what you can tell them. Because literally, it's running out of their hand. And at that age, sometimes they don't really think it's really that You know, they think we're drama queens and all that, but I'm telling you, another 20 years, another 30, another 50 years, we continue like this, we'll be like a foreign country. We're headed that way now.
I make it simple. I just ask them, how would they feel if somebody from government told them how they could tweet, who they could tweet, and when they could tweet? And if they could tweet, and how far they can tweet, and to whom they can tweet. And then ask them how they think government just can tell them to do that. Why should government tell them where they could live, or where they could drive, or what they could do?
Well, I have a 24 and 26-year-old. These are, well, one's just started medical school at Ohio State, the other's in Peru B school. The question is for that generation, for our kids, what sort of place do you want Northeast Ohio to be? What sort of place do you want Lake County to be?
Free.
Let me just finish.
Free.
Let me just finish.
Free.
I think we all agree we want it free. But these are kids that have choices to move other places in the country, by and large. I mean, I don't know about your own situation, but that's often the characteristic of the millennial generation. And we want very much to get their voices into this, because it really is about their region. And it speaks to freedom, but it also speaks to the qualities of place, the thing people are looking at. One of the things we find among the millennials, among our own kids, is they don't want to own cars the same way we did. They want options, they want choices to where to live. They want choices to live in cities, that's why they're filling up the buildings in downtown Cleveland. We never thought we'd get that many people living in downtown Cleveland. But to Tim Grendel's point, I think there are some efforts to make Cleveland more attractive. And the question is, how do we get those voices in? And we tried with a number of devices, like online surveys and Imagine My Neo, which is a game that we specifically designed it to address that demography. But it's really, really important, and I would encourage, and I do think Jeff Anderley is here in the room, he's our Director of Communications Engagement. I'd love to have your kids participate in this, because it's really about their plan. At the end of the day, this really, in my view, as somebody who grew up in Northeast Ohio, grew up in this area, came back here to raise my family here, and would like my kids to come back here, is what sort of place is it going to be for them? In terms of the quality of life, in terms of the way in which we interact with each other, in terms of the types of job opportunities we have, the types of environment we have. We don't want to go off to Portland, we want to stay here. But the only way to do that, to be perfectly frank, is to engage them. So I would invite you to invite them and participate. We have some meetings coming up. We're going to be, I think, meeting in Painesville. Ask them to come. Ask them to bring their friends. One of our biggest frustrations is it's very difficult across the country to get that generation, my kids' generation, to pay attention. We're tweeting, we're Facebook, we're doing all the things, we're getting good engagement. But it's really, really important to hear our young professionals, our college graduates, the people who have choices to be here or somewhere else by and large, and to create an entrepreneurial environment, an environment with choice, an environment with options, an environment that is vibrant, that excites people, that they want to come here because they come here. Kids go to Portland and then find a job. They don't come to Cleveland or Akron.
What town do you live in?
No, what we're talking about is opening up the window for more choices in the physical places that we live in. And that's one of the things, if you stay with us in this process, what you'll see is that there are opportunities unrealized, there are assets unrealized in Northeast Ohio to build community. And we ask you to get them.
Let me, if I may say, that when I ran for office, I had 50,000 voices in Geauga County speak to me. And that's the voices we should be listening to, not 1,500 who happen to fill out a survey. And also, just let me say something that I have been saying for many years. Much of what is talked about today is really talking about prosperity. Mr. Hunter says, we want to have good housing, we want to have good transportation, we want to have this, we want to have that. Well, in some sense, we all want that. We all want prosperity. Folks, the foundation of prosperity is liberty.
Okay, we're at our 15-minute point, and we have a number of people standing here to ask questions, and so we have a choice. We can cut it off now, we can continue.
Continue.
Are you? Well, there you go. We just had a response. Let me see if you're comfortable with this, because we want to respect everybody's time, including the speaker's time. And so the suggestion was, let's mingle and ask the questions directly. Are you okay with that? No. This is your meeting, not my meeting. No, you want to keep it going. Are you guys okay with it? Okay, they want to hear it. Okay.
Only 6 more.
My name is Pat. I'm from Richmond Heights, and I see one community that's not here that should be here. They are always put